Hello, today I'm going to show you how to make these coasters. They're flowers, a set of 4, predominantly made with treble crochets, US terminology, and they come with this sweet little leaf toggle holding them together. There is also a written pattern to this on my website. I have used a DK weight yarn. I've used this rainbow organic, they call it 88, and technically I would say it's more of a worsted weight or Aran weight yarn rather than double knit. It's quite a thick double knit, so you can use worsted weight or Aran cotton with a 4mm or G hook. You can use thinner if you use it. These are quite large coasters, so you could go down to a thinner double knit such as paint box and maybe use a 3.5mm hook, and that should be okay as well. So start off with colour A, the colour you want to use for the central part of the flower. We're going to start off with a slip knot loop on the hook, or however you normally start. Then we're just going to chain 6. And we're going to join to form a ring in the first chain with a slip stitch. So made a little ring. Now we're going to put 15 single crochets into this ring. So that's quite a lot of stitches to fit into this ring, so you're going to have to kind of shunt them along as you go. So I like to do 5 and then sort of push them over to the right. So we start off with a chain 1 and then 5 single crochet, first 5, and just push them. It can be quite rough. Push them along the ring because we've got to fit another 3 lots of those in there. Done 10. I should be able to fit another 5 in there. I'm catching the tail as I go around. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. I just like to do that because it saves a bit of work later. 3, 4, 5. Okay, so I should have 15 single crochets in this ring. It's worth counting just to double check you've got the right number. And this round I think it's best to finish off with a sewn bind off. You can just slip stitch into your first single crochet, cut the yarn and finish off, pull through as normal. I do prefer a sewn bind off, but it's entirely up to you. So to do a sewn bind off, I'm just going to cut the yarn, and then I'm going to pull my live loop completely open. Thread the tail end onto the needle, and because when you're making a sewn bind off you're actually making a mock stitch, you need to skip your first stitch and go into the second stitch in exactly the same way you would go with your crochet hook. So from the front to the back through both loops, and pull that roughly so it's the same kind of size as the crochet stitches. Don't worry too much because you can tweak that in a minute. Now if you have a little look here where this is where you've sewn it, where it's coming out of this, the last stitch you made, you need to go back down exactly that same spot, catch the back horizontal ridge as you go, and then just pull that pull that tail end a little bit just to tighten that up as well. Just pull that to match your other stitches so that it looks like another crochet stitch. And then you need to secure that at the back by sewing it into these single crochet stitches you've made in the ring to make sure that doesn't come undone. Go one way, catch a little leg, go back the other, and trim off your ends. You should have a ring, central ring that looks something like this. So we're now going to start round 2. We're going to join the main colour for your petals, and you can join the yarn however you like. Just don't join it into the same stitch where you finished. Try and join it into any other stitch, it's just less obvious, and also if you've done a sewn bind off, your sewn bind off stitch can be a little bit vulnerable sometimes, so it's best to start off in another stitch. So join the yarn however you like. I like to just have a short tail at the back, go into the desired stitch and pull up a loop. I will sew that in later, but now we're going to go straight into the pattern, which is we're going to put 2 treble crochets into each of these 15 stitches. And with a treble you start off with a chain 4, and that represents our first stitch, so chain 4. I'll quickly show you how to do a treble in case you have forgotten or you've never done one before or you just need reminding. So with a treble we're going to yarn over twice. We're going to go into that same stitch that the chain is coming out of. We're going to grab the yarn, we're going to pull up a loop, and now you should have 4 loops on your hook. Then you're going to yarn over, draw off 2, yarn over, draw off 2, yarn over, draw off 2. And I'll just give you a tip for this. With this stitch, with this particular pattern, we really want the stitches to be nice and neat and tight and sitting nice and close to each other without any big gaps. So what can happen sometimes, because this is a stitch with a lot of steps, what can happen sometimes is that you can accidentally lose control of this live loop. So instead of keeping it nice and snug to your hook, sometimes during the process of making the stitch you can accidentally elongate this. So I'll show you what I mean. So I'm just crocheting along. I'm going to make this stitch, I'm going to go into there, so I've just done a couple there, and you can see the difference is that the gap between the stitches is more defined, and that is because I've been much looser and haven't kept all my yarn overs in control, but more importantly I didn't keep this live loop under control, and it's made these top part of the stitch open and sloppy looking. So in some cases that doesn't really matter, but with this pattern, because of the next round, we really need to try and keep these as tight and neat as possible, because the next round will accentuate anything that's not been done as neatly and tightly as you can. So I'll just give you a tip as to how you can keep control of that stitch. So again, make sure that this live loop on your hook is not too tight, is snug, and it's not too loose. And then if you are finding that you're losing control, when you're yarning over, just keep your finger on the live loop. Then when you come to put the hook into the correct stitch, just put your index finger on all those 3 loops, then go into the stitch. Now you can let go, then you can pull up your loop, and again just keeping this all under control, and then finish off the stitch, yarn over, draw off 2, yarn over, draw off 2, yarn over, draw off 2, and that way you can keep, if you do struggle to keep control, that's one way of doing it. There are other ways. Obviously you can just keep this bit really tense, but I find because this stitch has so many steps to it, I find that just kind of holding it in place with my index finger is actually the easiest way. So let's go all the way around. We're putting 2 trebles into each of my single crochet stitches. So I'll finish this off and I'll meet you back at the end of the round. So just come to the end of this round. You need to make sure you've got 30 treble crochets, and then we're going to slip stitch into the 4th chain of our beginning chain 3, and we're ready to do round 3. So round 3 is just a series of treble crochet shells, really, I suppose you'd call them. We're going to jump straight into treble crocheting. We're not doing any chains or anything. We're going to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, and then we're going to treble into the 3rd stitch, and again make sure you keep good control of your live loop. So we've done 1. So in each of these, in this very same stitch, I need to put another 10 trebles. So each of these petals is made up of a shell of 11 treble crochets. So that was 10, and this is 11. So you can see, got our first petal. We're going to skip 2 stitches and slip stitch into the 3rd. So just bear in mind that when you've made this massive sort of shell here, that it's very likely that you're overlapping the first stitch you've got to skip. So just bear that in mind, because if you don't count those overlap stitches every time, you're not going to be able to fit your 5 petals in. So just bear that in mind, that this is overlapping, very likely overlapping the first stitch you need to skip. So that's skip 1, skip 2, I'm going to go into this 3rd one, and I'm going to slip stitch to secure the other side of the petal. And I'm going to make the next petal in exactly the same way. So I'm going to treble into the 3rd stitch from where I've just slip stitched. So 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to put 11 trebles into there. So the second petal is finished, and again I'm going to skip 2 stitches, being careful to count this one. It's underneath the trebles, 1, 2, and slip stitch into the 3rd. Now we've got 2 petals. So I'm just going to continue in exactly the same way for the 3rd and the 4th petal, and then I'll meet you just as I'm about to finish the 5th petal. So I've come to the end of the 5th petal. I'm actually going to join that into the slip stitch where I joined the previous round. So I'm just going to join that with a slip stitch. And get some scissors. Cut the yarn and just fasten off. You don't need to worry about a sewn bind off here, because it's kind of in a spot where you're not really going to see it. Okay, so that's round 3 finished. Now we're ready for round 4, which is the final round of the flower. So this is a single crochet round, and we're going to have to we're going to put 2 single crochets into every single stitch apart from the first stitch of each cluster. We're only going to put 1 in, and also the last stitch of each shell cluster we're only going to put 1 in there as well. So 1 in there, 1 in there, and 2 in all the rest. So you might have to experiment a bit with this, because from my experience everyone's single crochet varies massively. If you know that your single crochet is quite sloppy and loose, you might want to go down a hook size just for this border. I'm going to deliberately make my single crochet border as tight and neat as I can to give a really nice crisp finish. So I'm actually just going to start in this sort of third one along, and again you can join however you like. I like to just have the tail end at the back, hold it there, pull the yarn through, and then start the pattern. So in this instance it's a chain 1, and then I'm going to do 2 single crochets into that same stitch. I'm just going to catch a tail in as I go, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. 1, 2 single crochet. I'm going to carry on around and put 2 single crochet into each of these trebles. And when I've taught this, I actually designed this back in 2014 as a supplement to a class, so some of the students had finished the work. It was a 5-week class, and by the 4th week some students had finished their project, so I just did this as a quickie to they were relatively quite new crocheters, beginners, and I thought this is a good way to practice treble crochet, because it's just trebles, trebles, trebles. So you can get plenty of practice in controlling and learning the stitch through repetition. So here I've come to this the last treble of this petal, so remember I'm only going to put 1 in there, and then ignoring the slip stitch, I'm going to put 1 single crochet into the first treble of the next petal, and then carry on putting 2 in each. So yeah, as I was saying, I've seen a lot of people make these, well, my students anyway, and the single crochet border really varies massively from one student to another depending on their own specific gauge. So some people were finding that if they put 2 stitches into each petal it was too much and it was making it very frilly. Some people just needed to go down a hook size, and then other students found that they just needed to alternate, so they put 1 in 1, 2 in 1, 1 in 1, 2 in 1. So just do 1 petal or a couple of petals, just see what it looks like and see if you are happy with how it looks. So I'm just going to keep going round, 2 in each, apart from the first and last, skipping the slip stitch, and I'll meet you when I've coming to the end of the round. So I'm just coming up to the end of this last round, and again I'm going to do a sewn bind off with this. So I'm going to cut the yarn and leave long enough tail for sewing. Pull right open this loop, thread the yarn onto the needle, and then remember we're making a mock stitch, so we've got to skip the first stitch, go into the second stitch in the same direction as your hook would go, front to back. Try and match this loop we've just sewn, match it with the crochet stitches, and you're going back down the exact spot it's coming up from, where you cut it off, and then catch in that back ridge, pull it so that it perfectly matches the other stitches, sew it into a nice tight bit of the single crochet, making sure you're not deforming that lovely sewn stitch you've just made, and then catch in a leg, go back the other way for extra security. So do the same with the other ends. You've got some nice single crochet, tight single crochet rows to sew those into. Do that with all your ends. Make another 3 or however many you like. Now we're going to make the leaf toggle. The leaf's toggle starts here with the chain, and then we work this side of the leaf. We work a chain along here, then we make the loop, then we work back along the chain, and then we finish off with the other side of the leaf. Let's start with a slip knot loop on your hook, or however you normally start, and we're going to chain 10. Then we're going to single crochet into the second chain from the hook. The way we're going to work into these chains, we're only going to work into one loop. So if you are holding your chain vertically, then we're going to be working into this left loop. If you look at the front, it's like a V, so we're going to be working into the left loop. If you're holding the chain horizontally with it facing towards you, the front facing towards you, then we're going to be working into this top loop only. So it depends how you're holding your chain. It's either the left or the top loop. So we're going to single crochet into the second chain from the hook, and then for the whole rest of this side of the leaf, we're only working in this top loop. Then we're going to double crochet into the next chain, double crochet into the next chain, and then we're going to put one treble into each of the next 2 chains. So 1, 2. Then we're going to double crochet, 1 double crochet into each of the next 2, and then we're going to 1 single crochet into each of the last 2. So you should have something that looks like this. Looks a bit like a mange tout, doesn't it? Now we're going to make the stalk, and we're going to chain 17. So 17 for the stalk, and then we're going to chain 12 for the loop. So I'm actually just going to hold this stitch here so that I don't have to bother counting the 13th chain from the hook when I come to join the loop onto this chain. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then we're going to work into both loops of the chain. So with the chain facing you, you are going to go through the right and the left loops, and you're going to single crochet into that chain, and now you're going to put one single crochet into each of these chains in the same way, so through both parts of the chain. So if the chain is facing you and it's horizontal, then you're going through the top and the bottom loop. It's a little bit, takes a little bit of care, but it's worth it. So what you should have left at the back is just the back ridge of the chain. So I'm just going to work one stitch into each of these chains, and I'll meet you when I get up to the leaf. So I've crocheted all along into the chain, and I'm now back to the leaf, and I'm ready to finish off the leaf. So what might have happened, or what will happen, is that the leaf is actually facing the wrong way now. This is the back of the work, so you just need to twist it round so that it's facing the right way. It doesn't really matter which way you twist it, whichever way looks the best really. We're going to single crochet into the first stitch, or the first remaining bits of the chain from when we made the other side of the leaf, and then we're going to half double into the next one, and then we're going to put one treble into each of the next two. So this is slightly different to the other side, it's just I wanted a bit more of a natural look to the leaf, so I didn't want it to be completely symmetrical. And then we're going to put a double into each of the, one double into each of the next two. Then we're going to go for a half double, and then one single crochet into each of the remaining two chains. So then your leaf should look like this. And then we're going to join with a slip stitch into the first single crochet you made, which is here. And then you're going to cut the yarn and leave a reasonable tail, because we're going to sew that down the middle section of the leaf, just to reinforce it a little bit. So pull that through, pull it tight, makes a nice tip to your leaf. And then kind of weave it down this central line. Make sure I'm pulling the right bit, that's it. I think we can go a bit further. Way down to there. And then the other tail end, the beginning tail end, we're just going to do the same thing. I'm going to go also back up through the stalk, kind of weaving it in and out a bit. Just gives a bit more substance to the leaf. Makes like a little spine almost. So I'm going to trim that off. And it might be a bit curly like this, but don't worry about that, because once you're threading it through your coasters it doesn't really matter. So let's thread through. Oh, I've turned it the wrong way around. And then loop it over the leaf. And as I mentioned in the pattern, sometimes you might have to experiment a little bit with this loop, because everyone's gauge varies so much that you might make this loop and it might be much too short, or it might be much too long. So your chain 17 that you make for this loop and toggle, you might need to do less, or you might need to do more. So that's just going to have to be a bit of experimentation, really. So that holds them nice and neatly together. This makes a really sweet gift. It's also a great way of using up scrap yarn, and also these are quite good to use as like a washable face cloth, or like a scrubby. So it's quite nice that they're together like this. So maybe if you're going away for a few nights, it's quite good for travel, because it keeps them all together. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and if you do make this, I would absolutely love to see your projects. You can find the link to this pattern in the underneath the video, link to my website. Please do subscribe, and also it would be great if you could subscribe to my newsletter on my website as well, so that you can keep up to date with my any new patterns and videos that I might have coming up.